we were introduced by saying we were going to talk about the question, why should I choose you, and the importance of answering it. So you may be wondering why we've got this title on the slide. I promise you we are going to spend more than half our time today talking about why should I choose you, and the work groups that we're going to do afterwards are all going to be about why should I choose you. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to, why should I choose you is a question that is a part for us of a larger context, which is about doing things differently and like shifting from the traditional way of doing things. So we wanted to present why should I choose you within the context of a number of other factors that are related to it to give it this broader context. There's the traditional way of doing things, and what we want to do is like shift away from that. There was a time when women were not allowed to run for office or hold any public office, and then Nellie McClung and her friends came along in the 1920s and were able to convince society that women were actually persons and that they could start doing those kinds of things. There was a time when, traditional thought was that black people were second-class citizens, and then Martin Luther King came along with the civil rights movement and the whole notion of equality, and there was a shift there. There's another traditional way of doing things that was started after the Second World War, and it was really sort of the birth of modern business, both in how organizations operated and how business schools and management consultants taught us all about how an organization should operate. And what we want to do is shift away from that today and look at some new ways of operating. And that's why the title is called Some Unconventional Wisdom About Leadership. And one of the key points in there is going to be about the notion of why should I choose you. So one of the traditional foundations of traditional leadership is the notion of core values. And what I'm wondering is, can you put your hand up, and please keep your hand up, if your company or organization has core values that are defined. So if you can just raise your hand if your company or organization has defined core values. Great. Now, if you can just keep your hand up, just raise a little higher so everyone can see. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you, no, keep your hands up. Because, is that all? So keep your hand up, because what I'd like you to do is only put your hand down if you can name what all those core values are. Okay, so one or two hands went down. Now the other thing is, only put your hand down if those core values drive every day how you do your business or operate your organization. Now, the thing is, if you don't know what they are, you can't really say, yes, they do. and the thing is, okay, you can put your hands down now. That's the same for most organizations. Everybody goes to the time and expense of developing core values, and I'll just show you what some of them look like here. These are sort of the classic core values, right? Integrity, is that misspelled? Responsibility, honesty, accountability. So these kinds of things. Now, there's something about this list. Actually, there's three things about this list that are a little bizarre. So first of all, for all organizations, it's essentially the same list. It's sort of, pick 5 of the 8. And if every organization has the same list of core values, how does that really help distinguish who you are and allow you to operate in your own unique way? Secondly, many of these things are not actually values. Quality is not a value. Innovation is not a value. Customer service is not a value, right? But so many organizations have these listed as core values. The third thing is that these things are really just the cost of entry into the human race, right? So if you look at these statements, being ethically unyielding and honest, inspiring trust. Okay, we treat people with respect, fairness, and honesty. Shouldn't you just do that on a day-to-day basis as a person? Does a company need or an organization need to tell you to do this in order for you to understand that this is something that you should do. We're committed to maintaining an environment of inclusion, fairness, respect. Like, these are just really the cost of entry into the human race. So a core belief of ours is that traditional business tools of the post-war era, many of them, are no longer relevant. Okay? So that's what I was saying before about this shift away from the way we were taught by companies and business schools and management consultants that companies and organizations should operate. So leadership thing number one, is what you should do is you should develop core beliefs, not core values. Because core beliefs are actually things that will give people guidance into how that they should operate on a day-to-day basis, right? So if I go back one slide and I say, the traditional business tools of the post-war era are no longer relevant, then what that drives me and everybody in my organization to do is always look for new ways of doing things. Look for new and innovative ways of doing things because the tired old things don't work anymore. So that's a core belief of ours. There's a lot of different definitions of leadership, and I'm just wondering if we can get a few people just to state what their definition of leadership is. Is there anybody? Hand up if you'd like to. Someone who's not afraid to take a risk? Yeah, very good. Okay, so those are all great definitions, and just like the word brand, if I were to then say the same thing, can you say what your definition of brand is? We'd probably have 100 different definitions in the room, all of which would be right, just like all the definitions of leader would be right that we've got here. And what we do is we have a definition of leader that sort of encompasses pretty well everything that all of you said, and that is that leaders create leaders, right? So the primary role of a leader is to create other leaders. And so what I want to do is I want to contrast two leadership styles, and I want to make a very clear point here. This is not a comment on politics, okay? Because I'm going to contrast Obama with Harper. And this is not a statement on good or bad politics for Obama or good or bad politics for Harper. But it is a comment on very different leadership styles, and again, they're just different. This is not a qualitative comment. So, one of the things that Harper is famous for is this very centralized form of leadership, where he is the leader and everything flows out of his leadership, right? And again, I'm not making a comment on whether that's right or wrong. It's a form of leadership that has actually worked very well for him. And but I will contrast that with a leader like Obama, who, one of the first things that he did when he got elected president is he begged his primary competitor to join his team, and that was Hillary Clinton. So what he did is he surrounded himself with people who were smarter with him, and so he created them into leaders. And he nurtures them as leaders, and he lets them lead in their areas. And the thing is that as the leader among leaders, he gets elevated by their leadership quality. And the other thing is that when you don't have this command and control approach, and you just let leaders be leaders and nurture them as leaders, it's actually quite phenomenal what they're able to produce when they have that freedom. Roger Bannister is famous for being the first person to break the 4-minute mile. And what's not, the little known backstory about that is that he tried for 2 solid years to break the 4-minute mile running races in the traditional way, which is he enters the race as an individual and he runs as fast as he can to try and break that 4-minute mile. And that, for 2 solid years, that did not work for him. So he went to his coach and he said, we need to create another approach. We need to try something different. And so what this video clip, I'm going to talk a little bit. So the way that race was run, and this was the plan of the race, is that it was a 3-person team. It was a 3-person effort. And one person ran the first half mile in the lead. So he was the leader, for the first half mile. And as I said, Bannister kept saying to him, speed up, I've got lots of energy. And he said, shut up and let me do my job. His job was actually to slow Roger down to a 2-minute half-mile pace, and he did that very well. Then the third place and the first place took over, and the third place guy became the leader, right? And he kept Roger on a good pace for the last quarter mile, or for the third quarter mile, and then Roger took off for the last quarter mile. So the lesson here is to actually let your leaders lead. So it's not enough to create leaders as a leader, but you actually need to let your leaders lead. And I'm going to tell a story about us, and Ken allows me to put him on the spot for telling this story. So Laura had just joined us, and this was, I guess, about 3 years ago. She had just joined us as a student, fresh out of Humber, right? Yeah. And we been with us for probably a month, and we were having a big party. And we gave Laura the responsibility of planning the party, planning and executing the party. So for that month, she's doing all the stuff that she's, and then it comes game day, right? And Laura's doing the stuff that she had planned to do, and then Ken jumps in and he starts doing the stuff that Laura is supposed to be doing. And I said, Ken, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm preparing for the party. I said, well, that's Laura's job. Are you being Roger Bannister? And he just laughed, and he put everything down, and he walked away. Laura finished planning the party, and it was an amazing success. So the lesson here is to let your leaders lead. So create them as leaders, and then let them actually lead. Don't be a micromanager. Don't get in their way. And check in with them to see if that's what you're doing, if you are getting in their way. Too many cooks. That's exactly it. Now, the next clip I want to show you, about 6 months ago, a friend of ours sent us an email, and they said, you got to see this video. It's another TED Talk. It's by a guy named Simon Sinek. Simon is a, you know this one? Yes, it's great, eh? So Simon is a prof at Columbia University. He's a business prof there. And so our friend sent us an email, and he said, either you're ripping him off or he's ripping you off, or you've arrived at the same place without knowing each other. And so we looked at it and we went, oh my God, this is our process we call blueprinting. This is both the logical and neurological underpinnings for blueprinting. So let's look at how that works. The golden circle, so Dell, you know, if you ask people, anybody at Dell, what they do, 100% of them are going to be able to tell you, we make computers. If you ask them how, most of them are going to be able to say, we talk to you on the phone, we find out what your specific needs are, and then we custom build a computer just for you. Now that was a compelling notion at one point. It's sort of lost its luster. But where this really caused a problem for Dell was when they introduced an MP3 player and it bombed. And of course it bombed, because why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company, right? So the iPod owns 70% of the market, and it's made by Apple, and we line up for it. So it has nothing to do with the fact that it's a computer company, and has everything to do with the fact that Dell has no idea what its why is. Now, Apple has a very, very clear understanding of what its why is. Apple exists to change the game in everything it does, to change the paradigm. And the how of what it does is we make beautifully designed products that are easy to use. And the what is computer, iPhone, iPad, iPod, Apple TV, iTunes, and then everything that they come out with after that. As long as they stay true to their why, we'll line up at the Apple Store for it, right? So the leadership thing number 4, and this is really the conclusion to Sinek's whole, what he calls his decoding, is that people don't buy what you do, They buy why you do it. Okay, they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Now, I'll just go back and explain a little bit about why that's so. So there's basically three different parts to your brain, right? There's the brainstem or the reptile brain, and that controls things that really you don't have any control over, your heartbeat and your breathing and your tendency to run when there's danger. The other two parts of the brain are far more interesting, and one of them is your cerebral cortex. And your cerebral cortex is what processes, what rationalizes and what processes rational thought. So the what and the how of what you do, and I'm talking about any organization, not just companies, the what and how of what you do is all processed in your cerebral cortex. And the problem with using the what and the how to try and sell people on your product, your service, or your idea is that your cerebral cortex does not drive decision making. Okay? Your limbic system does. And your limbic system deals in thoughts and feelings. So the idea of trying to sell somebody on logic, of trying to sell somebody on features and benefits, on trying to sell somebody by using facts and figures is not going to work. You have to talk into their limbic system, not into their cerebral cortex. The way you talk into their limbic system is by talking about the why you do what you do, because that talks into feelings and emotions. Okay? So that's the neurological underpinnings for why the golden circle works and why Apple sells the way it does, for why Martin Luther King sells the way he does, for why Gandhi sells the way he does. Now, we've talked about 4 unconventional thoughts about leadership, and the question is, lead where? So I just want to tell you now a little bit about how Blueprint came about and how Ken and I met and developed this whole process of blueprinting. So we met almost 7 years ago, and we started having a conversation about business. And we realized that we had this shared passion for planning and this shared frustration for how it's done traditionally. Because you put together an agenda, and you go away on a 2-day retreat, and you grind through this agenda. And it always amazed us that no matter how big or small the organization was, no matter what the organization did, it was always the same agenda, and it always took 2 days to grind through that agenda. And in the breaks, people would whisper in the shadows about what a wank the process was, but they would go through it anyway. And then when they were done, they'd go back to work on Monday, rah, 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 new plan, new plan. And by Thursday, they're back to the same old, same old. And so we said, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a way to do this so that people are so inspired by the plan that they're actually compelled to implement it. And so we decided that, planning was broken and that we wanted to fix it. But we had to understand, of course, how it was broken first before we could figure out how to fix it. So when we stripped planning down to its barest essentials, it answers 2 questions. Where are you going and how are you going to get there, right? And it's linear. You've got to answer where you're going first before you say, this is how I'm going to get there. You'd never say, I'm going to go by snowmobile, excuse me, and then say I'm going to go to Cuba, right? So we realized that those were questions 2 and 3 in a 3-step process. And the first question, which is who are you, either nobody asked, or the process that they had for answering it was so superficial or dysfunctional that it renders the answer meaningless. And then what happens is, if you stumble coming out of the gate, you suffer from the 5-degree rule, which is if you're off by 5 degrees coming out of the gate, by the time you're a couple of miles down the road, you're going to be off by 45 degrees. So we actually created Blueprint just to answer the question, who are you? And what we found when we really, really nailed the answer to that question is that figuring out where you're going and how you're going to get there became self-evident. It's like the fog cleared, the veil lifted, and you just had this very clear and confident idea of where you're going. So we sat in Balzac in the distillery district one very cold January afternoon, and we created the blueprint for Blueprint. And we started talking about this question, why should I choose you? And the more we thought about it, the more we realized that it's actually the single most important question in business. And I just want to make very clear here that when I talk about business, I just do that by default. But it's for any organization, right? It's a nonprofit, it's a foundation, it's a charity, it's a political campaign, it's a politician, it's a person looking for a job. The single most important question is, why should I choose you? And what we found is, and the reason that it's the single most important question is you can have the greatest products, the greatest service, you can be doing the greatest good for society, but if you can't answer the question, why should I choose you, in a clear, concise, and compelling way, at best you're going to underperform, and at worst you're going to fail. So what we found when we really, really nailed the answer to that question is that it was always in 7 words or less. And so we sort of clued into this trend and just declared from that point on that it always had to be in 7 words or less. And the magic in that 7 words or less, if I can be so immodest, is not just that it answered the question, why should I choose you? But it also answers the question, who are you? So 2 seemingly very different questions, but they both have the same answer in 7 words or less. And the beauty of having the answer to the question, who are you, in 7 words or less, is that that becomes the definition of your DNA. That defines who you are at the DNA level. And then what it allows you to do, it allows you to hold your DNA up to all the parts of your organization and say, is this part consistent with our DNA? And if it is, that's great. If not, what are we going to do? What action plan are we going to do to get that part into alignment with our DNA? And what's missing from what we do, what do we need to add in order to make sure that the entire organization is wholly and completely focused on the one thing that makes us uniquely remarkable? So I'm going to tell you a quick story about a client of ours. And the company does retail shelving. Now, again, it doesn't matter whether you're a company or you're a charity or you're a political campaign. The underlying issues here are relevant no matter what organization you're with. And the reason that we love to tell this story is that because companies don't get too much less sexy than a company that does retail shelving. So, Home Depot builds a box, they go in, they put up all the rack shelving. When they're done, they leave the store, and the doors open and sales begin. And so we have this process where we get, the key decision makers in the company to reveal what it is that makes them uniquely remarkable. And where it got interesting with this company was when they started talking about how they had been in business for 3 generations. Okay, not 3 decades, but actually 3 generations. And they had developed techniques and processes and systems and procedures that allowed them to get finished significantly faster. So you can imagine, if they get a Home Depot done a week faster than anybody else, the store opens a week sooner, and that's a week of retail sales that Home Depot wouldn't have had with another supplier. So as we're having this conversation, the son of the owner says, in our signs where it says opening soon, I want ours to say opening sooner. And we just went, wow, that's brilliant. That is really brilliant. And then what we did is we looked through the filter of opening sooner at all the parts of their business. And we said, we went through each one and we said, is this part aligned with your DNA, opening sooner? And what we found was, to their credit, even though they never could have articulated this in the past, unconsciously, they had been living opening sooner, and probably about 80% of the business was aligned with this idea of opening sooner, and 20% was aspirational. Now, we have other clients where 20% is real, and 80% is aspirational. So there's a lot of work to do there. But it's a testament to the fact that your 7 words or less, or your DNA, has 1 foot in who you are now, and 1 foot in who you aspire to be in the future. Now, one other point I would like to make about that articulation of your DNA. When you think about opening sooner as the mantra for this shelving company, it really is an expression of a cause. Like, they don't say, we get you open sooner. That's a statement about themselves and what they do. They just say opening sooner. So it's this cause that's sitting out there that they're dedicating themselves to, but also their suppliers dedicate themselves to that, their strategic partners dedicate themselves to that, and the client is dedicated to that as well. So it's a cause sitting out there that everybody can be a part of. So what that means is that when you get to this point of defining your DNA, it really answers three questions. It answers the question, who are you at your core? It answers the question, who are you as a cause? And it also answers the question, why should I choose you? So leadership thing number 5, not surprisingly, is answering the question, why should I choose you, in 7 words or less. Now that is the reason that we have said, answer the question, why should I choose you, and not answer the question, who are you, or who are you as a cause, is because answering this question is an easier path to your 7 words or less. It's a more tangible path to your 7 words or less. So if you use that as your starting point, then it's going to be easier to get your DNA to reveal itself. Now, what happens is, so the way this works is, once you have your 7 words or less, your DNA, as I said, you can get all the parts of your business architecture into alignment. And then you really just need to tell the story about all of that. And that's really the third part of what we do. But at the end of the day, that blueprint guides everything that your organization does and says. And the metaphor that we use is it's the stone from which all the shadows of the organization are cast. So whether that's, R&D, product development, service development, donor relations, employee relations, strategic partners, marketing, sales, branding, doesn't matter. All of those things are clearly guided by your 7 words or less. So at the end of the day, there's going to be 5 things. If you can get to the point where you reveal the DNA of your organization, or if you're a politician, the DNA of yourself, you're going to get 5 things. First of all, you're going to get complete clarity about who you are and where you're going. That clarity is going to give you a confidence to lead boldly into the future that you never had before. The third thing is that from your executive team, you're going to have a unity that you never had before. Because not only are people working towards the same goal, they're articulating it the same way. And articulating it the same way is absolutely essential to working towards it together. And once they are working towards that goal very clearly, as opposed to their own interpretation of what that goal is, then they will integrate and cooperate more effectively. They'll work together much better as a team. The fourth thing is, we talked about how your 7 words or less will transform your organization into a cause. And if your organization happens to be a company, it's a cause with a business model wrapped around it. What that does is it gives people a sense of purpose. Probably your most important stakeholder group to have a sense of purpose is all of your employees. But you can imagine as well that it refers to anybody. It refers to your suppliers, it refers to your strategic partners, it refers to your investors, it refers to your funders. It gives them all a sense of purpose. And then the last thing is that because you can answer the question, why should I choose you, in 7 words or less, or another way of saying that is that you have a clear, concise, and compelling answer to the question, why should I choose you, you're going to be more competitive. You're going to be able to sell more, whether that is products and services, or people coming into your program, or donors who are giving you money, or funders who are giving you money, or politicians who are giving you support. You're going to be able to sell your idea far better and be far more competitive and successful as a result of that. Okay, so I just want to review. our unconventional wisdom about the 5 things you should know about leadership. First is core beliefs, not core values, because they will actually guide people's behavior in the organization. Secondly, leaders create leaders. So if you're a leader, the people who are your direct reports, think about creating them as leaders. And I'm going to jump to number 4, because once you create them as leaders, let them lead. And then, you know, our Golden Circle Simon Sinek video, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. It's essential that you know why you do what you do in order to sell people. And then the answer is, the last one is, have a clear, concise, and compelling answer to the question, why should I choose you? Thank you.